So greetings and welcome to today's educational program, Strategy Management with a Strategy Map and its Balanced Scorecard by Gary Cokins. This is your moderator, Doug Wood, with ASQ's Quality Management Division. So today we have the distinct pleasure of hearing from Gary Cokins. Please join me in welcoming him. So I've got a description of Gary so that you kind of know who he is and where he comes from. Gary Cokins is an internationally recognized expert, speaker, and author in enterprise and corporate performance management improvement methods and business analytics. He's the founder of Analytics-Based Performance Management, an advisory firm located in Cary, North Carolina. His website is www.garycokins.com, and we'll see that at the end again. Gary received a BS degree with honors in industrial engineering/operations research from Cornell University in 1971. He received his MBA with honors from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management in 1974. Gary began his career as a strategic planner with FMC's Link Belt division and then served as financial controller and operations manager. In 1981, Gary began his management consulting career, first with Dilbert Consulting and then in 1988 with KPMG Consulting. In 1992, Gary headed the National Cost Management Consulting Services for Electronic Data Systems, or EDS, which is now part of Hewlett-Packard. From 1997 until 2013, Gary was a principal consultant with SAS, a leading provider of business analytics software. By the way, Gary was also a contributor to my book from ASQ Quality Press, Principles of Quality Cost, 4th edition. And so, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Gary Cokins. Gary, the floor is yours.
So does your audio went?
Yes, go ahead. You're on.
Right here. There's a screenshot of the same title, but you can see there's my email address, and we'll come back to that at the end of the show. Let me explain a little bit more about my career. There you go. Doug gave me the years that I graduated. If you're doing the math, 70, I feel like I'm 40. I was a 2-year varsity football letterman at Cornell and enjoyed that. There's a reason that those books are there. I think careers have more to do with luck and circumstances than being smart and competent. And I had a couple of lucky breaks. One way back early in my career when I was with FMC Link Belt in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where the headquarters is for ASQ, I had the chance to become, after 3 years being the division controller, the bean counter, the operations manager. And I used the phrase, I then had to eat the accounting data that I had been serving prior. And I found much of that to be at best useless, at worst dysfunctional and misleading. And that was a real wake-up call to me, that management accounting is really different than external financial reporting for regulatory and statutory reporting. But a larger break was in 1988, after I was with Deloitte. It's Deloitte, Doug, not Deloitte. KPMG struck an exclusive contract with Professor Robert S. Kaplan of the Harvard Business School. And many of you will recognize him by what we will talk about in this webinar about strategy maps and balanced scorecards. But he did the early pioneering work in activity-based costing. I got recruited to KPMG. For 5 years, I did nothing but implement it. And I wrote a book at the end of that, and that led to more books. And so that's the explanation for the books, that I'm not pushing the books. In fact, don't buy any of them. Usually, if you just go to Amazon, Chapter 1 is a free download, and that's pretty much all you need to go. Okay, so let's get going. Who will benefit from this presentation? Oh, by the way, I was raised in Chicago. I want to get that in. Go Cubs, go Bears, go Bulls. Who will benefit from this presentation? Managers who have previously struggled at promoting corporate performance management and methods, including a strategy map and its associated balanced scorecard, into their decision support systems. Managers who intend to champion any or all corporate performance management improvement techniques, and they need a compelling call to action. And the reason I have champion in quotation marks is, in my observation over my career, that although it's nice to have senior executive sponsorship for new initiatives and ideas, often the executives at the top are preoccupied with firefighting or short-term priorities. It's typically managers 1, 2, 3 levels down in the org chart from the top that kind of have passion, fire in the belly, and say, how long do we want our organization to perpetuate? using some of these stale and arcane methods. And they're the ones that will do sort of a proof of concept or a pilot to demonstrate to their fellow line managers and executives above them, this is the way to go. So I actually enjoy presenting more to middle managers than to the top. I think this cartoon sets the stage for the entire talk. Drowning in data, but starving for information. This poor beleaguered clerk in the doorway to the left is asking him, it looks like you've got all the data. What is the holdup? You know, I gave you the request this morning. How come you don't have the answer this afternoon? And the reason is because there's a difference between data and information. You convert data, typically transactional, into information. So what I'm going to go through in the next probably 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. First, I want to clarify the confusion and lack of consensus about what is this corporate performance management. Then I'll briefly go, it'll take 3 or 4 minutes, through what I call 8 pressures that have caused interest in corporate performance management, because in reality, many of these methods have been around for decades, some arguably even before computers. Then we're going to zero in on one of the 8 forces, the strategy map. It's about strategy execution. I will describe it, how it works. I'm going to then differentiate KPIs, key performance indicators, with just other performance indicators. They're all important, but not every indicator can be a key. At the end, I'll show you how it all comes together. And then something that's really frustrating to me, there's really a slow adoption rate for a lot of these methods. Many of the accountants, I think, are in the 1960s, and we got to get them into the 21st century. So let's get going. Let's start with the top. There is confusion and lack of consensus about what is this corporate performance management. Is it human resources performance management? Well, if you just clicked on performance management or Google it, most of them are going to be personnel and HR, you know, employee appraisals. It's a subset. Is it about scorecards, dashboards, KPIs, and measures, which we will talk about in this webinar? Yes, but that's also it's all about aligning the employee managers with the strategy of the executives. Is it about process, productivity, and quality improvement? Yes, but that's business process management. So that's the world of lean management, Six Sigma, you know, kind of end-to-end business process productivity. You know, or is it all of the above and even more? And the answer is yes. And the good news is this. Corporate performance management is not something new that managers have to learn, but it's really the integration of many methods that most managers are already familiar with. I'll go through them in just a second. You know, profitability reporting, enterprise risk management, Lean Six Sigma, strategy execution. The problem is most organizations, when they do implement these, and not very many have, they implement them in isolation of each other. So you've got like profitability reporting in one part of the building, you got budgeting people in another, you got the process improvement in another. You get a lot more power and synergy when you integrate seamlessly all of these methods like gears of the machine, and even more power when you spice or embed them with analytics of all flavors, correlation, segmentation, clustering, regression. I won't go into that in this webinar. That's where the big data analytics is making its piece. So because you'll be able to get these slides, there's the definition I just gave you. Integration, multiple methods, each embedded with analytics, especially segmentation and predictive analytics. But make no mistake, its purpose is about achieving the strategy of the executives and making better decisions. So since I mentioned these methods, many of them have been around for decades, some even before computers. Why has there been interest in the last few years? Let me take about 3 or 4 minutes and go through these 8, and then we will zero in on the first one. The first one is executives' frustration with strategy failure. Most executives are quite good at formulating the strategy, or they'll bring in a high-end consulting firm like McKinsey or Booz Allen, or maybe they need a Big Four, Deloitte, PwC, EY. You know, their big frustration is failure to execute the strategy. And there's a much empirical evidence of this. Challenger monitor the turnover of CEOs, the terminations. It is increasing every year. The reason, because most board of directors post-Enron now take their governance jobs seriously. And if an executive's not pulling it off, like a good poster child is Carly Fiorina at HP, she didn't execute the strategy, she was out of there. Second force, increased accountability. Today, there is no place to hide. You will be monitored. You will be measured. Doesn't necessarily mean your job's at risk, but it could adversely affect your promotability or salary increases. 3, more rapid decision making. Unlike a couple of years ago, you could test and learn and have meetings in conference rooms with supervisors. Today, people are on the phone. Go or no go, yes or no. They need to make that decision in real time. They almost wish they had an executive sitting next to them listening to the phone call saying, what decision should I make? 4, mistrust of the management accounting system for transparency and accuracy. I'd really love to talk about that in this session, but that's where activity-based costing comes into play. It gets rid of all that butter spreading of overhead and traces and assigns individual, indirect, and direct spends based on cause and effect relationships. It honors the causality principle. 5, poor customer value management. Customers are the source of value creation for shareholders and for owners. The problem is most of the accountants and CFOs do not bother to measure profitability below the product gross profit margin line. They need to basically bring in the expenses for channel and customer service, a P&L, profit and loss statement, by each customer, so that managers and sales force can basically start zeroing in on not just growing sales, but growing profitable sales, knowing which types of customers are most attractive to retain, to grow, to win back and acquire, which types are not. 6, contentious budgeting. This may surprise you. I think the annual budget process is so broken, such a disaster. Basically, people laugh about it. It's out of date a couple of months after it's published. You know, caves into the loudest voice, strongest muscle of, the veteran sandbaggers and all sorts of other goofy things that people laugh about. I think the best thing about budgeting is stop budgeting. But then we have to ask the question, what was the purpose of a budget in the first place, and what can we replace it with? That's where capacity-sensitive, driver-based rolling financial forecasts come into play. 7, dysfunctional supply chain management. The issue there is most customers view their suppliers as the enemy. They basically pound on them, get their price down. If they put one out of business, so what? We can always get another supplier. That's got to stop. It's got to be a marriage. Trading partners need to have mutual opportunities to identify benefits from projects that they share together. And finally, 8, unfulfilled return on investment promises from large IT systems like ERP systems, enterprise resource planning, or customer relationship management. And the issue there is if you ask an IT director, chief information officer, 2 or 3 years after they went through all of the effort to implement a large ERP system, for example, how well do you think the return on investment met or exceeded what the ERP salesperson sold you on 3 years ago? I think their answer is, I don't know. We've spent a lot of time putting this thing in, and I don't see the payback yet. That does not mean you should not have implemented. Of course you should. Problem is they produce a lot of transactional data. What corporate performance management methods does is it converts the data into the information, and that's where the ROI comes from. It's like seeds from the ground. Okay, so now that I've sort of given you the overview, and I've written several books on corporate performance management, let's zero in on number one of the 8 forces. You remember it was failure by the executives to execute their well-formulated strategy. I love this cartoon. One of the reasons Kaplan and Norton will talk about basically designed what we're going to talk about is because most managers and employees don't really understand the executive team strategy. For example, if I went into your company and randomly interviewed 15 employees in the hallway and said, quick, can you articulate your executive team strategy? How many of them could do it well? Probably few or none. Well, if managers and employees don't understand the executive team strategy, then how do we expect them to understand what they do each day, each week contributes to executing the strategy? And that's where this Dilbert cartoon fits in. First box, a hacker broke into our system and found out our corporate strategy. Did he post it on the internet? I would like to read it. I'm also curious about my objectives for this year. You have the guy's email address. To validate and confirm a survey of the big heroes and look at the number of execution of the strategy. So what I'm going to talk about comes from basically a technique really developed by Professor Robert S. Kaplan. That's the same guy that taught me activity-based costing in '88. But then he went on to sort of team up with Dr. David Norton to develop the strategy map and the balanced scorecard. I'm just showing you a series of books that they wrote, but I'm now going to describe how it works. So let's step back. What you have here, you can see there's a balanced scorecard, and the strategy map is on the left. In a second, I'll explain why does the arrow go from the strategy map in the balanced scorecard. But above that is something arguably more important. It's the vision and mission statement. That is the job of the senior executives. That's what they're paid for, so much money. They've got to answer the question, where do we want to go? Their job is to set direction. What corporate performance management methods do, especially the balanced scorecard, is it answers a different question. How will we get there? What are the projects? What are the initiatives we need to accomplish in order to execute that strategy? Now this may, excuse me, a lot of organizations allegedly claim to have a balanced scorecard. They read the books and they kind of try to put something in, and I'll show you it in just a couple of minutes. Very few have a strategy map. The surprise to you is I think the strategy map is orders of magnitude more important than the balanced scorecard. The balanced scorecard is just a feedback mechanism. The strategy map is really like the GPS. That's where the real intelligence comes from. Strategy map and scorecards, they're mechanical. They're like one of those key gears in the machine of all the other methods, but they help realize that vision and mission statement of the executives. So to give you kind of an overview, there are these 4 perspectives of a strategy map. I'll read the thing on the right. Strategy map is a series of cause and effect relationships of the strategic objectives starting from the bottom and going up to the top. So at the very bottom we have the learning and growth. It answers the question, how will we sustain our ability to change and grow? It contributes upward to internal processes. Many of you in the AQS, this is kind of your domain. Where must we excel with our business processes? If you're accomplishing those, they'll contribute to the customer view. How should we appear to our customers? And if all of them are gravitating up, pushing up, you get to the financial view. If we succeed with all of this, how will we look to our stakeholders? So here's a generic picture of the strategy map. What Kaplan and Norton recognized over a decade ago was that senior executives were overreacting to financial results reported at the end of the period. They said, you need to shift your attention to non-financial information measured during the period and then react to it. And so each of the rectangles that you see, what that really is a strategic objective. I'll give you examples in a few seconds. But they go from bottom to top. So if we're accomplishing the strategic of learning and innovation, they'll contribute to the internal process improvement ones. And if we're accomplishing them, they'll contribute to the customer loyalty, satisfaction. And if we're accomplishing them, they'll contribute to the financial ones. The arrows that you see, those are the measures, the key performance indicators. You get what you measure. You can't measure it, you can't manage it. So let me decompose it. This is a fictitious strategy map. You'll notice there's 2 or 3 strategic objectives in each of the perspectives, but it really goes from bottom to top. Think of it like, a vector field, vector forces if you've got an engineering background. We want to line up all those vector arrows, with the top. Or think of it as the crew in the Olympics in boating. The ones that get the gold medal, everybody's in sync. The ones that don't get the gold medal, some of them are out of whack. The ones that don't even qualify, people are rowing in different directions. So it's all about aligning the behavior of the employees and managers with the strategy of the executives. Summarize, a learning environment will stimulate process excellence. Process excellence will lead to customer retention, intimacy, satisfaction. That will then create the financial value. If there are any public sector people listening to me in government, and incidentally, I just co-authored a book published by Wiley called Value-Based Management in Government, you could use the same method. The only difference is instead of maximizing shareholder value in the previous slide, it's maximizing community value, and you flip the financial view with the view of the citizens, patient, taxpayer, warfighters. In your slides, here is just a simplistic example from a European treasury company, a strategy map for government. Same thing. Okay, oh, I did actually put it in. There is the value-based management, those of you that are in public sector. Okay, let's kind of talk about, again, the mechanics of the strategy map. Now, using the example here for Southwest Airlines. Many of you may not know the history on Southwest, But in the beginning, many, many years ago, they only had 3 airplanes, and they were really running out of cash, but they really needed to add 4th and 5th plane so they would have more routes to get basically some traction. And so what their CEO said, look, the only way we can do this is we have to have a fast turnaround on the ground. None of this 45 minutes. It's got to be like an Indianapolis car stop. And the flight attendants, they're going to have to basically clean the plane. So we got to get those planes in and out quickly. So when we start at the bottom, look at the strategic objectives, ground crew aligned to strategy, develop the necessary skills. How do we basically refuel that plane in 10 minutes, not 45 minutes? Develop the support systems. That then contributes to the internal process, fast ground, turner ground. Then that contributes up to the customer view, offer lower prices, flights are more on time, attract and retain more customers. And that leads to the financial view, increased revenues, lower operating expenses, gain in profitability. That's the concept of a strategy map. Now, this is just an interesting example of a company that did not have a strategy map, didn't know how to start. And a consulting friend of mine basically said, well, let me just take your annual report and take that letter from the CEO that's in the first few pages of the annual report. I'll grab that word, I'll grab profitable growth, I'll grab great service. I'm grabbing lines that are all in the paragraphs. There they all are. Now, I will create my 4 perspectives. That word, profitable growth, goes in the financial view. They all go in another view. We connect them together. Voila, a strategy map created just from the management letter. Okay, what this slide is describing is who is responsible for what in the rows, the executive team or the managers and employees. And the reason I want to show you this is because there's been a shift in way consultants have been implementing the strategy map than in the past. In the past, they just got the executives in the room, they did the whole 9 yards, finished it, employees were not involved. That's changed. Here's why. The 5 columns that you see, those are all that were in each of the rectangles, those boxes that were in the previous 2 maps. I'll start with the strategic objective. That's got to come from the executive team. They've got to define them. But when we go to the next step, which is to identify what are the few and manageable projects that can be accomplished to meet the strategic objective, or in some cases a core process that must be improved. A better approach is delegate that to the managers and employees. Then the next step is have the managers, same managers and employees, have them identify the KPIs themselves, even though the executives might have done a better job. But then when we get back to the targets, all KPIs need targets, now we're back to the executives. And then the actuals, I probably should put a row here, a 3rd row, because the computer now can produce. Once this is done, yes, then the managers and employees can present this to the executives in like volleyball or tennis. You know, the executives can tweak it and change it a little bit. Why is this a better way to go? Well, one, if the managers and employees have to do it, then they're going to understand the strategy. And that solves that problem of 15 employees in the hallway that don't understand the strategy. But more importantly, the managers will have buy-in. They are the ones that have defined the KPIs. They're going to be held accountable. Remember number 2 of the 8 forces. You know, if the executives did it and rammed it down their throat and said, you know, this is, we're mandating these KPIs, there won't be as much buy-in from the managers. A scorecard is much more of a social tool than a technical tool. And I will share with you, each year I get older, and I am 70, I find how much I underestimate the importance of change management and behavior modification. It's a big deal. Resistance to change is human nature. We'll talk about that at the very end. Now, there is a way that the strategy map is dynamic. It can't be static. It can't be, you know, last for a year because things are going on. And I want to show you with this example at the very top. We've got the executives with just 3 KPIs, X, Y, and Z. And if you're really sophisticated, you can do coefficients and weightings. Now we've got the line managers in the next row, marketing, operations, sales, and so forth. Each of them has their own unique KPIs, A, B, C, C, D, E, maybe with. But when the executives basically shift the strategy because something happened, Notice at the top, I've still got the same 3 KPIs, X, Y, and Z. But when I basically convert down, one of the groups had E, F, and G. Now it's E, F, and Q. We've abandoned G, and we've replaced it with Q. It doesn't mean G is unimportant. It means it's less important. So notice this thing is a navigational system. And when you're at the very bottom, when you cascade this down many, many layers, notice the vertical arrow to the left. It gives them a line of sight. So employees and managers can answer, what do I do, how it contributes to the success of the strategy execution. To summarize, imagine this, what it really does is imagine if every employee in your organization every day could answer this single question. How am I doing on what is important? How am I doing on what's important? Answering the first half of the question is easy when you've got a strategy map and scorecard. They come in the office, they turn on their computer, they look at the 3 dials. Is it favorable or unfavorable to the target? The real challenge is the second half of the question. What is important? How do you define and select what the KPI should be? The strategy map and scorecards provide this answer. The overriding purpose of a strategy map and scorecard system is to make mission and strategy everybody's job. It's almost like making owners of the employees. Now, there is a problem. And I've been quite experienced at seeing, when I was with SAS, many of you may not be familiar with SAS. It's the world's largest privately owned software vendor, 15,000 employees. And we had strategy map software, and many software vendors do today. And I visit some of our customers, and I say, oh, you got a strategy map. How many KPIs do you have? And they'd probably say, oh, 300. And then 300, that's great. How can they all be a K? They can't all be a key performance indicator. So what I'm going to show you on the next slide, it comes from an article that's in this link. When you get the slides, you can read it. This is the difference between strategic KPIs, the box at the top, and what I really should call OPIs, operational PIs, at the bottom. Here's some of the differences. KPIs should be displayed in a balanced scorecard because there's cause and effect relationships. Operational PIs can be displayed in just dashboards because dashboards, like in your car, don't necessarily have connectivity. Another differentiator, KPIs must have targets, like the mule with the carrot. In contrast, operational PIs, they can have targets, but they don't need to. They could be trend analysis or lower bound thresholds. Another differentiator, frequency of reporting. Quarterly, monthly, okay. Once we get more frequently, weekly, daily, we're no longer strategic, we are operational. Another differentiator, the KPI should be derived uniquely from the strategy map, like tailored men and women's clothes. You don't want to go to a generic website and what are all the KPIs used in oil and gas or banking or insurance. You uniquely define them to your own organization. Next, all KPIs should be of 2 types, project-based and process-based. Most organizations, unfortunately, only have process-based. They're still non-financial, on-time delivery, customer satisfaction. The reason you need project-based, and examples would be percentage of completion of the process or milestones in a project I meant, is because strategy is about change. You don't do the same things over and over again a little bit better, and projects are how you get change. And then a problem which we won't talk about here is the strategy is disconnected from the budget. The problem with the accountants get fixed. I love this cartoon. It's got a row of people coming to a signboard. There's the answers. To the left, simple but wrong. To the right, complex but right. Notice very few are taking the right path. This is a problem. Most organizations just trying to have things simple. Keep it simple, stupid. The KISS rule. They forget about the LOVE rule, LOVE, leave out virtually everything. So I do want to show you a technique, though, that I do. I do a little consulting, a little gig. It's just a couple of days, workshops. Because managers learn by doing. They learn by doing something themselves to their own organization. And I want to show you a fast start technique that I've been doing the last few years with clients. It's based on the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and the SWOT analysis. I call this crawl, walk, run, fly. I help organizations with the crawl. What I do is I have the executives the night before fill out 20 SWOTs on yellow Post-its. The next morning, 8 o'clock, Notice the left slide. I say put your yellow Post-its in the 4 perspectives. I've created the 4: learning and growth, the process, to customer, to financial. Then in middle slide, I say for the next 30 minutes, without talking to each other, move the Post-its to ones that are similar to other Post-its. And by magic, maybe not magic, they cluster. And you can see in this middle slide, they're clustering 2 or 3 strategic objectives in each of the 4 perspectives. We're done with it by 10 o'clock in the morning. Now to the right is the rest 3 or 4 hours. What's a project or initiative to accomplish those objectives? What would be a KPI? Remember, actually, the definition of a KPI, I should have mentioned it. Monitoring the progress towards accomplishing the strategic objectives. That's why the definition of a KPI is about strategy execution. The definition of an operational performance indicator is measuring a process. They're all good. They just serve different purposes. So let me start bringing performance management. Question is, how does all of this fit together? And I want you to start thinking about this as a circulatory system, sort of like in your blood, okay, your heart and your blood system. The big box at the bottom, that's all of your resources. That's your employees, your assets, your equipment, you know, it's your capacity. Let me show you how this slide works. But I do want to remember, if you remember my force number 5 about customer value, we want to connect customer value all the way to shareholder value. That's what that arrow is. All right, where's management accounting and analytics? I didn't put it in there. Why? Because the output of management accounting information and business analytics is the output to, is the input to so many different areas. It's so pervasive, it's universal. All right, here's how the diagram works. The executives will formulate strategy based on the customer needs, just sort of keeping it simple. That's where they will come up with the GPS. Once they formulate it, they will then communicate it to managers and employee teams with the strategy map and the balanced scorecard. That's where what we described to you. Then, once managers are receiving the scorecard and KPI against their targets as feedback every day, every week, they can all answer that question, how am I doing on what's important? And when everybody's got targets, they can answer, how are we doing on what's important? So those 3 big arrows, that's the strategy execution piece that was in this seminar. When we move to other webinars that I've not done, maybe the ASQ will have you do another one. This is where we get into the management accounting, the targeting, which types of customers are attractive to grow, to retain, to win back, to acquire, which types not, how much do we optimally spend getting them. That's really about understanding the ROC, the return on customer. Then we get to the process view, which many of you listening to me, probably this is your world. You know, the world of lean management, 6 Sigma, lean accounting. You know, take the customer order, complete the order. You know, admit the hospital patient, heal the patient. You know, better, faster, cheaper. That's the whole productivity piece. You know, but when we put it all together, it's more than better, faster, cheaper. It's smarter. So the point is this: shareholder wealth creation is not a goal. It's a result. And I hope what you see on my computer is on your computer. I have the bubbles flowing through these veins. This is what's happening every minute, hour, day, week, month, year. But to the degree that any one of these veins is constricted, it's going to basically constrict how much money can go to the shareholders. And I think it's important, almost a tribute to the senior executives, to know, where do we have constraints? If we don't understand where we make or lose money, profitability, then do activity-based costing. If managers don't understand the strategy or what to measure, then do what I described in this webinar, strategy map. If our processes are inefficient, then go do process improvement, ERP systems, lean management. You know, but the point is this: to the degree that we have inefficient processes, poor targeting of the right types of customers, poor alignment of managers with the KPIs, then the money leaks into the sewer. It doesn't go to the shareholders. So that's, if you will, think of this as the vision of what you want to have in the future. So the way to kind of think about this is the source of the return on investment for most companies basically has shifted from tangible assets to intangible assets. So what I mean by that, the ROI is shifting from investments like in machines and hardware and computers to an intangible asset like information. And what this diagram is showing as we move from data to information to knowledge to insights to decisions, that was the bottom axis left to right, we have an exponential curve. But the problem is that most organizations are stuck in the first two red bubbles to the left. All they have is raw data and standard reports. All they can answer is what happened. In some cases, the chief information officer or IT director has given the third bubble some of the managers some drill down software. Some of the software vendors are Click, Tableau, Power BI for Microsoft. That lets them drill down, for example, a line item of a purchase order or invoice. Corporate performance management begins with the first blue bubble. It's modeling. Costing is modeling. Costing is not T accounts and journal entries. And I would argue that the strategy map is a model on one page of the executive team strategy. Once we have that, then we not only know what happened, we know why did it happen. We've got the feedback. Then when we go to the predictive view, now we're not looking through the rear view mirror, we're looking through the windshield of the car. We're talking about forecasting, what if scenario analysis, driver-based rolling financial forecasts and the like. And that's the real popular part of business analytics. And then when we go, so now we not only know what happened, the first blue bubble, why did it happen? It's what can happen, what's likely to happen. At the very top, we've got optimization. And, you know, my undergraduate was operations research. I'm a real active member with Informs. If you're familiar with Informs, Institute of Management Science and Operations Research, informs.org is its website. You know, and that's all about optimization. You know, but that's a long ways away. That's where you'd use linear programming and really powerful tools. Then you would be able to answer not only what happened, why did it happen, what can happen, what's the best choice if it can happen. So this is my frustration. Why is it taking so long for organizations to implement these methods? What are some of the barriers? Well, one of the barriers are technical barriers. They include dirty data, low quality data, but you know, IT has figured out how to use extraction, transform, and load, the acronym is ETL, to clean up data. Or the company may have, if they're larger, disparate, if you will, hardware. They got Dell equipment, HP equipment, IBM equipment. IT can figure that out. The next barrier is the perception barrier, excess complexity, affordability. You know, I just showed you that a strategy map can be done, at least the first iteration, in one day, not a week. I also do something with activity-based costing. I build the first ABC model enterprise-wide in 2 days. It's a workshop. Then in a couple of iterations within 3 or 4 weeks, they've got a repeatable, reliable ABC system, not 6 in a year, and it's ramped up. But the real barrier is the third one. It is organizational behavior. It involves resistance to change, culture, and leadership. This is the problem. It's got nothing to do with hardware or software. You know, people, it's human nature to resist change. Only babies like change. And then we've got other problems, fear of knowing the truth, fear of being measured, fear of being held accountable. Weak leadership, there I said it. You know, not every executive team is basically, you know, the best executive team. This stuff is what's getting in the way. Our problem, though, is many of us do not have degrees in sociology and psychology. You know, but you almost have to think like a psychologist or a, you know, sociologist. So let me conclude with a bunch of excuses why people don't advance. First one, we are profitable, so why does it matter? Well, you could be more profitable. We will purchase software that will fix our problems. No, it's not software. It's basically thinking. A fool with a tool is still a fool. We already know our true costs from our general ledger financial reporting system. No, they don't. They know their expenses. They don't know their costs, which are calculated. We have done it this way forever. We don't do that here. We already know everything. It's in our heads. That's not a way to go. We are a small organization. We'll worry about better methods when we get larger. Well, guess what? You may be bankrupt before you get larger. All this hype is just made up stuff from highly paid consultants. Well, I'll tell you what, and this is basically a kudo to consultants. Consultants have something companies don't, the ability to focus. Excuse me. Most companies have so many short-term priorities in firefighting, they don't have the time to focus. Next, no one looks at the reports I create, so there's no point in generating better reports. That's sad. You know, manager, an analyst that's really trying to do their job. Next, we cannot afford better software to fix our problems. Most of the software can actually be pretty low priced. We are way too busy doing other things. Well, you know, get your priorities straight. If you can't execute your strategy, you're not going to basically make it. Finally, we don't know where to start and how to get started. I gave you an example with the yellow Post-its, how you can actually get started in one day. You're not done, you know, have your strategy map and balanced scorecard ready to go. So I always like to think of the gears of corporate performance management like in a machine. Most companies, probably yours, have dirty, grimy gears, not what you see here. Their teeth are broken, they're disengaged, you know. It'll work. If it was in your car, it would work, your fuel efficiency be low. Now replace it with these titanium gears, spinning faster revolutions per minute, if you will, you know, lubricated, digitized. Now what's your fuel efficiency if that was in your car? Much higher. Now replace fuel efficiency analogy with rate of shareholder wealth creation. So at the bottom I've got make the revolutions per minute of the corporate performance management and business analytics gears better, faster, cheaper. That was that whole process, lean management, Six Sigma, safer, enterprise risk management. I didn't talk about that, but that's part of this, and smarter, using the GPS strategy map of the executives. So my action steps: get educated. Thank you very much. You're doing that now listening to this webinar. Get buy-in. You're going to have to get buy-in from others. Rapid prototyping. Do these pilots. Start small. Think big. Improve the incentives. I don't have expertise in motivational theory, but I know it's important. If you get the slides, there are 3 links. The very first one is a 5-minute read. You can actually give it to some of your coworkers. The second link is an article I wrote for the Operational Excellence Society, another professional society. It's about a 10-minute read. And at the bottom is the link to that KPIs versus PIs, the 10-page article. So from theory to practice, your success depends on how well and how fast the right information intelligence gets to the right people. There's my email address. And John, or Doug, sorry, I think I probably went 5 minutes over, but I think we've got time now to have some Q&A and some discussions.
Okay, Gary. Yeah, we've got some good questions here, and I'm sure some more will be coming in as we go. So I had one that you answered already. Okay, it's been 24 years since the Kaplan and Norton Balanced Scorecard book. Why is it not applied everywhere yet? But I think you answered that one, so we don't even have to go into that. Another question was, David Kajik says, should Balanced Scorecard be inverted? Management tends to focus on the top and work down. Okay. Do it the other way around. Start with the learning and development.
Oh, it absolutely is a bottom to top. In fact, part of the problem, as I sort of mentioned earlier, is, you know, most executives, what they cared about was, oh, what's the financial results? Did we make our numbers? Did we make more or less profit? How are the shareholders? You know, that's the consequence of all these other things. So it really is intended from bottom to top. You know, the causality principle is so misunderstood, and that's really, those KPIs are cause and effect linkages. You know, something I didn't talk about, there wasn't enough time, you can actually use correlation software to look at the last, let's say, 12 or 24 months of KPIs, and then look at how well they actually met and affected the KPIs that they feed into. So if the correlation is high, that's good, but if it's low correlation, it means, wait, I've selected KPIs that are not valid. So it's another way of using deep analytics to validate the quality of the KPIs. But to the person's question, it's always bottom to top.
Okay. Yeah, that was great. We had another one here about so one question. Gary asked the question. He says, I experienced a PI being elevated to a KPI, not because it was better, but more because it was simply a gate that everything went through without adding value. It did give great results for the scorecard. Bonuses aside, how do you compete with value KPI?
I'm not sure when you slipped in that value KPI, I think, I use a dichotomy, KPIs, and I probably should call those OPIs, as if it's, 0, 1, black, white. The reality is it's a cascading. Sometimes the measures will go down all the way down the organization chart, 5, 6, 7 layers down. And so, but the KPIs, I think, should always be reserved for the very top. I have a simple rule, 3 KPIs per strategic objective. So if I've got 3 strategic objectives in the 4 perspectives, 3 times 12 is, or 3 times 4 is 12, times 3, 36 KPIs, that's it. But then once I start cascading down, I can have 150, 300, I don't care, if you measure it, if it moves, you measure it. But they're all starting to serve a little different purpose. It's really about, improving process, efficiency, productivity. Maybe when the person who asked, I missed the first name, said value KPIs, since this is so social and you're trying to influence behavior, if you think, hey, I've got an operational PI, but I think we should put it into a KPI because I want to get that kind of behavior from this department or that department or this end-to-end process, go do it. This is a social system. It's about behavior. It's really social engineering. We're trying to manage behavior. Okay, next question.
Okay, so one question here was, how do we fix KPIs target for those KPIs where there is no past data available?
Yeah, this, or even if we selected a KPI but we're not measuring it. I'm a ready, fire, aim guy. You may have picked up just from the way you do rapid prototyping. I would just, move fast. You may not have the data. Start thinking about what the data is. Start thinking about how we would collect it. Manage people's expectations. Maybe don't put incentives or bonuses on a KPI that you're getting your training wheels. You're early. You're still in your infancy trying to master collecting it. But in the end, data is so important. Measures are important. As I said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. You'll get what you measure. Next question.
Okay. Dennis has a question. Can you give a recent example of this approach transforming an organization?
Well, yeah, at a higher level. I did one. This is an anecdote. It's going to take about 2 minutes. It's for a manufacturer who basically makes vests for bulletproof vests. And they are selling to the military, army, as well as to police forces. And we went through the whole yellow Post-its exercise, but what happened as we got into it is the management team at the top did not have consensus agreement as to where should we go? What is our better market? Should we be selling to police forces in all municipalities in the states of the United States and internationally, or should we be selling to the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force? And I used the word transform, although it wound up being a 2 to 3 hour discussion that got off of talking about the strategy map. It was very beneficial for them because they finally came to grips. And some of them didn't trust each other, and that's a whole other game, that the transformation was they figured out what the right path was. Then the strategy map and all the KPIs, that then kind of became a mechanical exercise. But they needed to know, are we going to go to the left, right, or are we going to go to the right? Next question.
Yeah, it sounds like you found a hole in their foundation, huh?
Well, it's that the strategy formulation, they hadn't completed it.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, this is good. We have a question here. What is your advice on coaching up when strategic initiatives change? How can the organization quickly adjust when targets are always changing?
I think one has to realize it's well, you look at the COVID-19, I mean, I've been given this presentation for a few years, but the COVID-19, which is, radical departure, things will always be. Competitors are coming into play, new products blindsided you that you didn't know about. I think it's just that the executive team, has to educate and get buy-in. There has to be trust in the strategy map and the balanced scorecard and the KPI methodology. And so that when they do realize, wow, we've got to modify a KPI, or we've got to increase a target amount or lower a target amount, everybody's got to realize or be educated this is a living organism here. It's not static. It's frozen for a year. It's not a fixed contract that everybody's got to be stuck with. And that's why you mentioned about motivational theory, because some organizations, the bonuses, the budget is so fixed, that it is a contract. And so the managers are going to continue to behave towards what they think the contract is, how they're going to get paid, when in fact things shifted under their feet.
So the back to that, budget once for the whole year thing, which is just ridiculous. Okay.
I'm a fan of capacity sensitive, driver-based, rolling financial. When I say capacity sensitive, and we've only got a couple of minutes, I mean, think like an industrial engineer. You got to classify the behavior of the resources as sunk, fixed, variable. And that classification depends on the planning horizon. The short term, most stuff is capacity is not adjustable, so our costs are fixed, but you go out weeks, months, you can replace full time with temps, becomes variable. You gotta really be sophisticated. So listen, Doug, it's a professional courtesy to end on time. We've got 4 minutes. So I'm going to move to your next slide that you wanted to end with. And they've got my email address that they can send me questions and have dialogue. My website has many free downloadable articles, PDFs, in the tabs in the website. Take it away.
Okay. So